Welcome back to Meet the Makers. Today I have a very exciting guest with us. I have Daniel Orr, and he often works with the Missouri Institute of Natural Science, one of the most exciting creators that I have come across in the 3D printing space. What he specifically does is 3D prints components for dinosaurs inside of their museum. I have not seen anything else like it on social media, and so excited to talk more today and just to get to know you and your projects a little more. So first of all, thank you so much for jumping on with us today.
Thanks for having me. As I said, we've been trying to get this set up for a while, and I was excited to do it.
We've gone back and forth for a while, so I am super excited that we finally got to sit down and find time to talk today. I'll kick you off the same way, and I'm sure that it'll go down a crazy different path, but to start off, how did you get into 3D printing and making stuff in general?
Oh, I guess I could make the backstory. We'll get this a little personal, too. COVID had hit back in late 2019, early 2020, and they started having the shutdowns. And my dad, who had a triple bypass 20-something years ago, needed to go back to the doctor and kept getting pushed off because of COVID restrictions. And when you couldn't go to the doctor, he ended up having a series of strokes before he got in. And I helped take care of him every day. And I needed something to do on my own. And I'd been coming to this museum once a year for several years since my kids had been in middle school. And I was out here hiking a trail nearby, and I'm just like, I'm going to walk in there and check it out again. And there was the volunteer sign up, said, hey, we need volunteers. And I said, hey, I've always thought about that. I worked nights most of my life, and my kids were in school, but they're adults now, and I work days. Like, put in your application. And I did that. And like I said, I'd watched the stages of Henry, the Triceratops, for a long time. He was in the cast that came out of the ground behind a partition in a small building. I started volunteering, and they started getting together, having meetings, saying, we've really got to get this thing done, because it was a donation from a landowner in Wyoming. We were like, what are we going to do? And I'd always had an interest in 3D printing. I'd never seen one before in person, honestly. And I said, hey, I've been thinking about doing this. Do you think this is a process we could do? Because we are a very small museum, very few resources for people to even get away and build something out of plaster. And he goes, I think we could. He has another friend he's with the museum. And we talked to him. He's like, we could absolutely do this. He goes, I know people from several other museums who will let me use their scans of the stuff we don't have. I can scale it to what we're doing. Then he goes, I'll make the STL files and send them to you. We have a Google share file. All right, I'm going to look and find the biggest 3D printer I can within my budget. The first printer I got was the Creality CR10S5. It was a 500 by 500. That was not a beginner printer. I spent a good 2 months just beating my head against a wall until I figured out how to do this. And that turned into getting other printers. Mainly I started with the Crealities, that teaches you a lot. Like I said, this project, it has about 14,000 hours of printing in it. I do the stuff on the side. I just like everybody else, I've got the Bamboo Lab printers now. And I do a lot of other stuff for the museum. Through Patreon, I have a Flexi Factory who does all the skeletal dinosaurs. And so I print those and we sell those here for fundraising in the museum and such. I actually bought my first printer. It was a very complicated, large printer, and I did it just to do dinosaur bones at first.
I just got my first larger format printer myself, and it's definitely a bit of a learning curve even compared to my other printers. So I have to imagine being newer to 3D printing at the time and running massive prints on that, even from just a bed leveling standpoint, that had to be quite the adventure.
I didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't looked at stuff. You tram it. I didn't really know what all that was. Even on the Crealities in the beginning, even getting your starting layer, I would start a print and then manually adjust my Z-axis in the micrometers to get it to start. That's how I started every print for a year, especially on Crealities, because I never did learn how to exactly get my starting Z-axis part for a long time. I'd start it and I'd be like, Z-axis adjust, and it goes in like 0.1 millimeters in that or whatever. I'd adjust it out that way, and I knew what its offset was. Even when you did get them figured out, the springs and stuff were, after 3 of them start normal, they're already off kilter again.
It's like having flashbacks listening to you talk about this. It's been a while since I printed on my Crealities, but I was the same as you. I would manually adjust my Z offset on that first layer, like trying to just get things to go down. Now with you, it sounds like you're on Bamboo too, but it's like a whole different process, totally.
I actually went from Creality to the Anycubic stuff, and those Anycubic Vipers were about the same price. All auto leveling, no screw, and those things worked great. I've run 5 or 6 of the Vipers into the ground, and they've moved away from that line anyway. Then I've had 2 of the Anycubic Cobra Maxes, and I've run them to into oblivion. They're not repairable. And now I think I'd mentioned something about the Elegoo stuff. They're all still in the box. I haven't opened them yet. I got 3 of the Elegoon Neptune 4 Maxes. And that's the 420 by 420 by
Okay, yeah.
450 or 5, somewhere in there. Because I went through the whole deal, and I've got a partnership I'm getting ready to start with Elegoo. So I hadn't heard back from them. And then yesterday I was at home, and my son's, "You got another printer out there on the porch?" I said, "No, I bought those 2, and I've never taken the other one down to the sea." He goes, "No, you have another one." I'm like, "Oh, they finally sent it." So I'm really got to get back into my content creation so I can push them, because that's going to be great for us, because I have 3 of those to print stuff. My next project is I'm going to completely recreate the Triceratops. We're either going to find another museum who wants it, or we've thought about putting it in the lobby at the local airport, or maybe the library, something that gets it out there and people can see and be like, "This is the real ones at this location, go check it out," kind of deal.
It's crazy. I know we were talking before this that you're starting to get back into content. And I know it's been a while since you posted, but even seeing just how far since the last update that we've seen from Henry, the last update that I saw on your page, there was a lot missing stuff. So seeing you in the background now, it's really cool seeing so much of it having come together. As you were talking in the beginning, you answered a lot of my questions, but take me back a little bit. He wasn't originally from Missouri. You said he was from Wyoming?
He is from eastern Wyoming. With anything fossil-wise, there's a geologic time scale to the Earth. Our geologic layers here are way older than dinosaur stuff. Henry's late Cretaceous, so he's going to be like 66, 67 million years old. What we have here in Missouri is that ancient sea life. We're looking at 350 million years. You have to find the right areas and be lucky enough to know somebody in that field. We are actually the first dedicated natural history museum in Missouri. As of right now, we're still the only real mounted dinosaur in the state of Missouri. But our director, this is like what his life has been. And he got him on a dig. He took some people on a dig with some friends who were digging on a property of this rancher in Wyoming. And even at that, it's private property. It actually belongs to the landowner. And he said he'd left. They dug for a week, and he just goes, "There's something special about this dinosaur. I want it he goes, "We need this in Missouri." And he called the rancher back, got to know him, and they negotiated terms, and they went back and finished digging over a couple of years. Actually, because he was discovered in 2013, and we actually just went back and did the last dig on him. This is 24 in 23. We didn't really find much, but we just that finish up dig, and we were trying to hope to find some of that last stuff. And because like I said, that was 2013, and I've been here for 4.5 years as a volunteer, so I wasn't even there for the major dig stage of it.
That was one of those things I was curious about. So you came in about 4 years ago. When you had come in, had they started doing any? I know you mentioned maybe some museums do it through plaster. Obviously, you guys have done 3D printing on it, but had they started reconstructing anything up until this point?
Yeah, there was. What we had up in here, you had a big part of the frame built already, and you had the skull. The skull is a recreation. We never found the real skull, and it's a plaster, it's simply a sculpture. They had a couple of the leg bones that they'd filled in that way, but after that, we started completely with the 3D printing. I think we did one with kind of wooden plaster, and it was his right scapula, because we needed to get it up and mounted. It was a complicated piece. The guy hadn't actually made files for it, and he's like, we're just going to cut it out of wood, build it out of plaster, and he got that up there like that.
Okay, makes sense. For you guys, and if I'm understanding correctly, so basically you were able to look at other records of other dinosaurs and create files off of that then to backfill what you guys didn't have records for?
Yeah, the guy who helped us, his name is Henry Sy, who was a PhD paleontologist who taught at the local state university here in Springfield, Missouri. And he's not one of those who likes to go out in the field. He got permission from the Smithsonian. Their Triceratops is named Hatcher, and it's actually quite a bit smaller than ours, but he got permission to use their files, their scans of what they had, and then he scaled it to what we had. This is actually the largest Triceratops ever found. There was nothing out there comparable, so he had to actually take it and scale it, which was an interesting process, because you would think if something's twice as big, everything would be double scale, but it just didn't work that way. If you compared stuff like this, ribs might be 2 times as big. The feet were only 14% bigger vertebra. So whenever it grows up, it's not at an even scale per se. No, I found that really interesting, that things didn't grow in it just because your femurs are twice as big doesn't mean your ribs and vertebrae are twice as big.
That is interesting to hear. And I guess it's similar to humans too. If I think about myself, I'm a little taller than average for a woman, but I have incredibly short legs. Like I'm not very proportional. So I guess
I'm the same. I have short legs. I'm almost 6 foot, but I wear a 32-inch inseam. And I know people who are 3 inches shorter than me that have 34-inch inseams. It's just nobody's, and no thing has ever been exactly symmetrical or exactly proportionate. Yeah. And it's what makes us unique.
For sure. Seeing you next to it, it's crazy the scale of it. And you said it's the biggest Triceratops that's been found up until this point?
Yeah, because they have formulas they can do based off bone measurements to give you an estimate. And I think average for a Triceratops is like 8 to 10 metric tons. And Henry's conservative estimate was 18 metric tons. So it's not like he's this much bigger than the next one. He's exponentially bigger than the next one.
He's like the Shaq of dinosaurs, it sounds like.
That's exactly the way I say it when people come in. I'm like, he's the Shaquille O'Neal of Triceratops.
I love that. Coming back to the 3D printing side of it. So for you guys, you make the decision that 3D printing is the way that you guys are going to go about this. You're going to start creating pieces from that. Looking at the components that you guys have printed on there, it looks like they match very well to everything else. It looks like it blends very well into all the other components. What does the finishing process look like for those prints?
Honestly, if I had any real bad support sticking, I always tried to orient it where that would be hidden or behind. If it was a big enough piece that we had to cut it into pieces and put it together, even what you do with real bones when you're patching because they're fragile, you have like epoxy putty where it's called paleo putty, and you mix it together, and we'd push that over the seams. That was, back then we used mesh mixer, which is just, excuse me, is a bitch to use, especially when you're trying to put dowel rods or things. I actually use Bamboo Studio for almost everything now. That is just, I know some of the other like Cura have added that where you can cut and slice and add dowels, but it's been a game changer being able to do that.
I haven't had a ton of prints I've had to slice into multiple pieces, but even for the basic, if we're talking about slicing a Mandalorian helmet, nowhere near as complex as what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah, I was like, you were talking about that as I'm working on our second dinosaurs, the Dinosaur. It's like biology, all animals. You know what a sacrum is? It'd be like your tailbone where the bottom ribs and stuff. Let me see if I can scoot back. That's the sacrum for the new dinosaur.
Wow.
I just broke that off. That's all right. It was a secondary piece. We're going to putty it all back together. That's it. Okay. That's even like with the real dinosaur bones. Like they say, if you've never broken a fossil or broken a bone, you're not a real paleontologist.
That's one of the things I was thinking while going through watching your content. I guess for your everyday person like you or me, I'm used to going to a museum and it's something where it's like far behind ropes and you can't touch it. But it seems like at your museum, you guys have things like pretty open to the public.
We do have a barrier around him. Kids can't go up and touch him, but we do keep a lot of stuff. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in that day and how I want to interact with people or how the kids are acting. But I keep stuff in different places where you can go up to the counter and be like, hey, here's a real chunk of dinosaur bone you can touch. And then go to another place. Oh, here's a mammoth tooth you can touch, and just different things. We try to be interactive. And we've actually used a small museum. Even this week, it was last Friday, we had some people come through who were from Europe, and they said they'd been traveling around and said they actually went in the Smithsonian and looked around the Smithsonian, and not our dinosaur stuff, but he told us our gem and mineral collection and display, he liked it better than the Smithsonian's. They're always proud of that kind of stuff.
Now, for you, it sounded like you had gone to the museum, you had gone multiple times, and you had just almost fallen into it, of realizing that you could volunteer there. But did you have a background in being interested in just all this stuff in general before you started here? To
an extent. You know, what kid didn't like dinosaurs? I'm that age. We got one section on it in 4th grade. My graduating class was under 100 people. I went to a town when I was a kid, there were 3,000 people in town. And that's the early 80s, mid 80s. Here's your 5 dinosaurs you get to know about, and then you move on. So there's not really anything to foster or continue that kind of growth with kids who are interested in that. That's one thing that's really great about this museum, because we have a summer camp program for kids called Dino Camp. We really have something in the area that kids can come and learn more. When I was a kid, you had a T-Rex, a Triceratops, a Pterodactyl, a Stegosaurus, and maybe one or two others, a Brontosaurus. And these kids come in now that are 5 and 6 years old. I've been here for 4.5 years and I'm learning a lot more than I used to know, but these 5 and 6 year olds know more than I ever will. It's just like, what about this dinosaur? It's my favorite dinosaur. And I'm like, I've never heard of that.
Kids just absorb that stuff like a sponge. And I think if you can get kids interested early, that kind of sticks for life.
We've actually had some kids that come through here in their early, when they were younger, and went through Dino Camp or different things. It's not all dinosaur related, but there's kids who went through here and learned from this museum who have gone on and done good things in paleontology and got degrees. We have kid right now who's actually in the University of Wyoming getting his degree in paleontology. He's already got jobs working for ranchers, leading digs as a summer job. There are a lot of museums out there that are even larger museums, and you go in it, and they're not much more than a curated collection anymore. And this museum still publishes papers and does research. Not
Oh, wow.
me. I'm an enthusiastic volunteer. I work at a cheese factory as my real job, so that's...
Oh, get out. It's a very unique profession. I have to say you're the first person I've ever met who's worked in a cheese factory.
And it's a large international based company because you're in Arizona.
Yes. Yeah.
We're at in Arizona.
Okay. In the general Phoenix area, like
Okay.
off the...
We have a plant in Tempe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Small world.
Yeah.
Very cool.
We're actually going to be in Tucson with the museum in February. Tucson has the world's largest gem, mineral, and fossil show every late January, early February. And so we're going to go out there as a museum because we go out there and buy stuff in bulk for our gift shop and stuff like that. So we're going to go out there for a long weekend and buy a bunch of stuff to bring back.
That's super cool. I never got super into stuff like that, but I've always wanted to. I had gone to one gemstone show with one of my friends. She was very into it. I could see how you could get just super entrenched into it. And it seems like a collection that you could never have an end to finding things to collect.
No, not at all. I do a little bit, like I'll do vendor booths with the 3D printing stuff to make a little extra cash. And I'm adding minerals and fossils into that. I bought a pound of fossilized shark teeth a while back from a kid, and I've been setting those up in the little crystal trays and stuff. So I'm going to start adding that in and trying to sell stuff like that. I'm going to try to find some stuff for my own personal collection and my own booth when I'm out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. I'll pick you off the stuff I'm showing.
Yeah, and it's not like you go into a big arena. It's sections of town that are like, you go to these hotels, they push all the stuff to the back of the room. These hotels make so much money, they don't care. And like you go in from hotel to hotel, and you can go from room to room. It'll be different vendors, and it's like the entire town. Here's the people from China with the stuff from China. Here's the section of people from Morocco. Here's Brazil. It's like the entire town, not just one convention center.
I've lived in Arizona for 5 years now. I've never known about this. So that's cool to hear about. I know that you mentioned you've been doing some shows. I'm not sure if it's something you're still doing, but in the past in your content, I saw that you were doing a lot with Lithophanes. Is that still something that you do?
Oh, yeah. I love that. I can't really take that to shows too much because it has to be custom made. One of my favorite events I do every year now, it's a Japanese fall festival. And I will make up about 10 or 12 of those. I'll make them a little smaller where they'll fit on those rotating bases. And each one will be a specific anime. Like, here's your One Piece. Here's your Dragon Ball Z. Here's your Sailor Moon. My Lithophanes really take off at Christmas time. I actually had a lady from work order one 2 days ago. That's just something, like I said, I see a lot of Lithophanes done in social media, but when I started doing the woodworking, the wood frames, and the lighting, I've never really seen anybody else doing that. I'd like to get an Etsy page and actually push that, but I get easily overwhelmed. Where do I find the time? How do I do this? I mean, I spread myself pretty thin.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of interest and a lot of talents. That was, like you said, the way that you do them, it's pretty unique. I don't see a lot of other people like incorporating the woodworking into them. So I thought that was really cool the way that I saw you do them. For people who maybe aren't familiar, can you briefly talk through what like the Lithophanes are?
Essentially, it's a 3D printed picture. You have a program you run it through. I use lithophanemaker.com. You go in and set your parameters. How tall do you want it to be? You can do square ones. You can do round ones. I do a lot of they're circular. You can do 3 or 4 pictures and it makes a cylinder. I try to do standardized sizing to make my woodworking easier. So I do them at 50 millimeters tall. And I try to edit the pictures to be 1:1 scale. That way everything comes out uniform. But it essentially prints them standing up. You do 100% infill so you don't see grid lines through the light. It decides how thick it needs to be in different places. When your light comes on behind it, it creates the picture based on the depth of the plastic in each location. I buy LED, battery-powered LED lights off of Amazon usually to put in them. And like I said, the round ones, I'll make a wood lid and wood base. Sometimes I'll burn the wood. If somebody wants a custom color. Like I had a guy order one where it was pictures of his kid from his different school sports, and their school colors were red, and so I did all the woodwork in red stain. I'll try to personalize them a little bit like that, but it's just one of those things that's really unique. People really like them. You can do them where they're circular and put like a tab on them. Then if you make them about 80 millimeters across, you can hang them on the Christmas tree in front of a Christmas light, and they'll almost perfectly light them up. I actually do that at work. You guys know what an angel tree is?
I'm
There's
not
other
familiar. No.
it's our local foster care system. A lot of times it's harder to
Oh,
get. Those kids will all write down something, turn it in, even though they're in foster care, and a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
business will pick those up. So I will actually, instead of buying stuff, I make those at work, and people order them from me. I sell them for $10 a piece, but all that money goes into that program so they can buy presents for the foster kids. I usually make $500 or $600 a year to buy presents that way.
Oh, it's awesome.
Because
Yeah.
I do a lot of other work like that. 'Cause we have a local county. It's called OCAC. It's an organization to help fight poverty. They have OCAC Head Start, which is like a free preschool if you meet the the financial requirements. My girlfriend is on the board in this county. Every year we have a mac and cheese festival. Last year I 3D printed some little cheese wedges with mice on them, and we just had them set up where they're not a $20 item, but if you donated $20, you got one, and I raised $500 for that as well. They had a pickleball tournament here recently, and I made the trophies for their pickleball tournament. And I've done stuff. I think if you went back one of those videos I did, I've done trophies here for like
Yeah.
contests with the Triceratops skull for second, third place. We used to have trunk or treats, and we do costume contests. So I'd make trophies for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you, like I was saying, and like you said, you have a wide range of things that you make. It sounds like you have a lot of different
Yeah.
experience doing different things there too.
It's a very good supplemental income unless you have a full-blown print farm
Right.
and you can pump out 100 items a day. When you're running 6 or 7 printers, it's a passive income. I get up in the morning to
Yeah.
start them. I'm at work and I build up an inventory, and I'll do a farmer's market here or there, and I do 2 or 3 big events a year, like that Japanese fall festival.
Yeah.
We found another one we'd like to do. It was like Two Friends and Junk. It's a big Christmas thing, and I'm going to try and do that next year. There were no other 3D printers there, they said. So
Oh, okay. It sounds like maybe you have about 6 printers. Did I hear that right? That you guys are that you're running right now?
let's see, I've got one P1P, two P1Ss, an A1 Mini, and 2 A1s. And now I'm setting up the 3 Neptune 4 Maxes. But over time, like I said, when you mothball all the Crealities, mothballed all the Vipers, I've probably had over 30 printers overall. It just gets to, like I said, the Crealities are great to learn on. I've heard other people say that, even I think on your podcast before, and it's good to learn on. You learn a lot, but then even though you see people say, "Oh, don't start with the bamboo because it's a crutch," there comes a point where even if with the Crealities, once you do the upgrades and you keep replacing hot ends, that $150 Creality eventually becomes $1,000
Yeah.
bamboo, and it's just I can't take the time and the money for this anymore. It's
My first Creality, I always say I over-engineered that thing to the point where it wasn't even functional anymore. But if I think back to the original cost, I think at the time the Creality, I had the Under 3V2, I think it was a $270 printer. And man, crazy to even say, but I probably put $500 into different things that I tried upgrading on it. And at that point, you might as well just buy a bamboo printer. So
which
it's
a lot of those weren't out yet. But
yeah,
anybody who's asked me about getting into it, if they want their kids to have something because they like what I'm doing, because I don't say no, don't get it. I'll just send them the link. I said, here's the bamboo A1. Or if you don't want to spend that money and you're not going to print anything very big, get the A1 Mini. But the AMS, when you can get into that for under $500, I think you can get into it around $400 with the A1.
yeah.
What else? Why get something else?
I've only been printing for about 2.5 years now, but just in the time that I've been printing, it seems like it's completely changed things. And I have to imagine probably for you and the stuff that you make,
Do you have a dinosaur in the background as well? Is that a Dilophosaurus?
It is a Dilophosaurus.
Yes.
I didn't print it myself. Actually, before I had a 3D printer, I'd purchased this on Etsy. It is 3D printed, and I just thought it was the coolest thing. A couple years later, I got a 3D printer myself, but it's always something I've had around. So when we decided to get on today, I figured it would be a good opportunity to break it out for our call.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah.
It sounds like maybe you had a little bit of this when you were young. I think everybody's interested in dinosaurs when they were younger, but I was definitely a dinosaur lover as a kid, so I think it stuck with me.
I think my school project in 4th grade was a diorama, and I made clay dinosaurs.
Yeah. It seems to be a thing no matter what generation you're from. Kids always love dinosaurs, and that seems to stay true over time. For you, as you're working on it sounds like you're doing like a whole other dinosaur now. Are there any other projects, whether dinosaur related or not, that you really want to work on as a 3D printing project?
Like I said, I like doing my booth and stuff. I don't sell online because when you go through TikTok, it's the race to zero. You can't compete with them.
Yeah.
So I do the stuff around here, and it's fun to do that once in a while to do a market or whatever. But most of my other projects are museum related. This place, like I said, I was talking about when my dad was sick, and this was my getaway. I started that I started volunteering in June of 2020, and he passed in August that same year. At that point in time, like I said, I was that single guy in my mid 40s and a small town. This place and these projects probably kept me from being an alcoholic at the local country bar. So everything I do, I like. It's just this museum. Like I said, it saved my life. This is where I want to do things. I've become pretty good friends with the director. He actually works for the county here as well. He's the county geologist. At one point in time, he goes, you know what? There's a gal that works down here in the county office. She's not a county. He goes, I think you two should meet. And now we've been dating for 3.5 years, and we're getting ready to move in together in the next 6 months, remodeling a house. He knew her well, and she does a lot of stuff. She's on boards and stuff. So now she's actually a board member for the museum. So we're very invested. Nice. We're very invested in this museum. I remember looking at it because I'm going to recreate the Triceratops. We want to try and get it in places. After I get done with the one we're doing now, it's called a Nodosaur. Do you know what an ankylosaur is? The big armor-plated one that would have the club on the tail.
Oh, yeah.
It's in that family. It doesn't have the club on the tail, but it's a big armor-plated dinosaur. We have that big armor-plated shell, so I'm 3D printing a skeleton to mount that shell on top of. That's what I had
Nice.
the sacrum for over here. We're going to try and find some place that wants a copy of the Triceratops. If they don't have room, maybe somebody wants just a full-size replica of the skull. We could put it somewhere and say, hey, this is where we want that. I've been looking at files yesterday. I would like to maybe make a recreation of a one-scale megalodon jaw and have that in here. We have some people who know how to do the paleo painting to paint it to look more realistic. It'd be neat to have a big megalodon jaw for a photo booth for kids or something.
That would be super cool for sure. I've seen that at some other place, and I feel like it's always a hot hit for
it is
for photos.
No, go ahead.
Have you ever been to Buffalo, New York? By chance?
I have. I've been through there. I've never been to any of the museums or anything. I was there in the early 90s on a family vacation, but I was talking about our friend Henry Sy, who made my STL files. He was a teacher here in Missouri. He took a job in Connecticut. He and his girlfriend were moving out there, and he was going to be a professor. A week before he moved, his moving company bailed on him, so he had to rent a U-Haul. He left his Jeep with me, and I could take vacation about a month after that. I drove his Jeep to him, and I left way too early. I got to about Indianapolis because it was going to take you across Pennsylvania. And I'm like, you know what? I'm running way too early. So I Googled it, and I cut north through Cleveland at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was standing by myself overlooking Niagara Falls. It was a neat experience.
I ask, I'm actually originally from Buffalo, New York. In Buffalo, we have giant buffalo statues.
Okay.
They're like painted in different ways, and you'll go to the airport and they're there, and you'll go to museums or schools and even doctors' offices. I was thinking for you, like maybe you guys eventually have something like that with Triceratopses everywhere.
We have actually had that idea run around a little bit because you have like downtown area, they'll have art walks, but the buffaloes, they do that in Custer, South Dakota as well. If you've never been into like South Dakota and the Black Hills, it is so beautiful. They have those buffalo statues all over town there, and different organizations, places paint them up, different scenery on them and stuff. And that's really neat. We've talked about that. Like I said, you get a board and nobody all agrees with each other. We'll probably do it with the ankylosaur because you get that big armor-plated shell. You would have a surface to paint. We've talked about recreating the Triceratops at half scale to put someplace where it could fit in town. And our director's very big. He goes, what makes him special is his size. And whenever you reduce him down, you're just making him any other Triceratops. And he goes, I don't know that I like that idea. If you're going to put him outside with limited space, you could 3D print it, but then you're going to have to make molds so that you could mold it in something. And we don't have the storage space. You would need a building of its own to the molds for the skulls and things like that.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I understand where he's coming from. I do think the size of your Triceratops makes them definitely special.
The first thing I'm going to do when I get all the Neptune set up is I'm going to do a 1/1 scale recreation of the skull. Because that's what I said. I was grabbing some stuff here. This is a tiny, but I printed that on that CR10 S5. I've done some other, that's 1/25th scale or 110 scale maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I mishear? Did you start calling it tiny? Because I would say that's anything.
Yeah, this is
but tiny.
This is a tiny version.
In terms of stuff that I'm used to 3D printing, it's massive. But I guess in scale to your normal one, it's tiny.
I scaled that up as big as I could get it on that CR10 S5, and that was a 5 or 6 day print.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say? Sorry.
Go ahead.
What would you say is your largest or your longest print that you guys have done over there?
I had one. You know what the coracoid process is?
Yeah, yeah.
It's where your bicep and your shoulder blade meet. His left one is real, and Henry did the photogrammetry on it, and you just reverse the axis, and we printed the right one. It was minutes shy of 11 days.
I don't think I've ever encountered a file that's quite that long, so that's pretty
Like I said,
impressive.
now I could really reduce the amount of time. The printers are better. I was running everything with a point 0.4 nozzle. I
Yeah.
was running everything like 20% infill. It's going to be up here for years. It's got to be pretty sturdy. So I've got point 0.8 nozzles I'm going to put in those Neptunes, which that'll help cut time in half. And I said, if I were to do him again, it would not take 14,000 hours. I could probably cut that time more than in half.
That's interesting. It's actually something I didn't think about, but yeah, even speaking in terms of the infill on it, I guess if you were to reprint this again, would you drop it down? It sounds like you were doing 20% infill standard. At that point, you think you could drop it down?
I'd drop it down to 10, probably. Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, I would love to make one copy of it and make the molds, but I'm going to have to win Powerball tonight so I can build a building to put the molds in.
For you, it sounds like working with the museum and just like all of the things that you've done there, I'm sure they've gotten a lot out of it, but it seems like it's given a lot back to you personally.
Oh, absolutely.
Just hobby-wise, yeah. For people listening to this, I guess it's probably different from museum to museum, but do you think this is something like other museums? Like, are volunteers needed at museums, would you say?
Every museum out there needs volunteers. That's one of the things when we got into this. Even though this took so long, it probably wouldn't have got done on this scale because, like I said, when we were doing this, I was 3D printing it. And what we would do is we'd come in, 3 or 4 of us on a Thursday night after hours and weld and cut and build the frame and work on it. We'd come in on a Sunday when we're closed and work on it. We'd come in on Memorial Day when we were closed and work on it. We're not like the Field Museum in Chicago or the big museum in Denver. They can build everything behind the scenes and then roll it out and stuff. At best, we usually have a solid crew of 3 or 4 reliable people.
It's cool seeing what you guys have been able to put together there. It seems like you guys are growing.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, we're getting ready to add on the building. We built a great relationship with that rancher in Wyoming. So we go out there and dig every year. That's something I never in my life would have thought I would have done. The last 3 years, I've gone to Wyoming for a week and you primitive camp and you just get dirty and dig.
It's a definitely unique experience. I guess for you, did you ever, before you got involved with this a couple years ago, imagine this being something that would be part of your life?
Absolutely not. No. Like I said, middle class person, you can have one hobby at a time. That's all you can afford. Before this, my hobby was cars. I had my souped up Mustang, and now my son has that, and I do this.
For you, I'm sure your museum that you are associated with, I'm sure that's your number one museum. But if we take that out of the equation, are there any other museums that you've been to over the years that you really have just loved or maybe are on the top of your list?
Yeah, absolutely. There's the School of Mines Museum at the college in Rapid City, South Dakota. That's up at the northern part of the Black Hills. I'm going to go completely through the Black Hills for a little bit. There's the Black Hills Institute of Natural Science in Hill City, South Dakota. And if you know the dinosaur world, have you heard of the big T-Rex fossils like Sue and Stan and all that?
Yeah.
That's the museums that they came from. That's actually where our director got his start. He was a 16-year-old kid on vacation there and went in and talked to those guys. It was Pete and Neil Larson. They were brothers. And they're like, where are you from? And he goes, here I was, this scroungy kid riding motorcycles. I'm this scroungy kid who came in off the street off a motorcycle with long hair. And he goes, they treated me like I was a human being. No big deal. And they're like, Missouri, that's a place that needs a natural history museum. And that's what put the seed in his head. He was working, I think, for the parks department in this area. And they were doing a road cut just down the road here where they were blasting the road. When you drive through a road cut, you can see the drill marks. They drilled holes to put all these charges in, and they started putting the charges in, and they'll blast like 10 of those at a time. And I think they had 2 of them that had charges in them. And this happened on 9/11 in 2001, and a national cease blasting order went out. And when those charges, they're not removable and they're not safe to leave, and they had to sit there for several hours, but they got special permission to blow them. And when they blew them, Missouri is called the cave state, and they opened up a cave. And if you go up on we have a little area where we can take kids fossil hunting and stuff for our local fossils, and you can go up there and find the holes that are drilled where they're supposed to have charges, and they go right over the top of the cave. And they called people out to look at it. He was one of the 2 that came out. He was just a kid, early 20s, working for parks, and they said he went in and they just had the headlamps and stuff on, and this cave had been completely sealed off. And he goes, I came out lying my ass off. I said, you have to move this road. This is the most significant find ever had. And they actually moved the road,
Wow.
redesigned it. It took a couple years. They got back into the cave, and we got in, we did the research, started doing the testing. It made an honest man of him. It's actually the oldest fossil cave in North America. It was a short-faced bear cave. It has claw marks in the wall. There were mammoth pieces. There's layers in there that go back like, I think, 1.1 or 1.2 million years. And that's actually why the museum's here to begin with, because of 9/11. So it's tragic for American history, but it actually is why we're
See
here.
something. Right, yeah, no, it's crazy how sometimes things like that happen by weird circumstance. Oh, that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, out of tragedy did come something good for our area. That's
Yeah. For you, I guess one final question. You're at the museum at night, and maybe this is a goofy question, but I just have to ask as a fan of Night at the Museum, has anything crazy happened at night at the museum or anything weird?
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, because I do this project and we used to keep the printers here, what we call a key holder. Membership has its privileges, as he always says. So I come out here and I would work on stuff after hours by myself or to check on the printers. Actually, I'll just come out here because it's a zen place to be. I was out here one night, and I think it was a Friday night, and it was about 10 o'clock. It's dark outside, and I'm in this area where I'm at now, and I just hear this bam at the back door. And I'm like, oh no, what is that? So I go over to the back door and I'm like, hello? Because it's a steel door, you can't see through it. And I just hear this lady crying.
Oh,
And she's,
no.
can you help me? I'm like, because there's a lot of valuable stuff in this museum. And I'm like, okay, here's the moment that I step out the back door and I get jumped because, and I'm like, my phone's dead and I need to call a cab. I got in a fight with my husband. Or, I don't remember all the exact wording, but I'm like, ma'am, I'm in here working. I said, I can see the street out there. I said, I got to finish up in here. I need you to walk back down to the street where I can see you. When I come out, I'll come down and see if I can help you. And like I said, she did that. I could see her walk down there, and I went out the door. I had my pocket knife in my hand. I went in and out so fast I could shut it so somebody couldn't come in. But no,
No.
I went down to the street. I found her, and actually just down the street from us is the ritzy neighborhood with the fancy golf course. There was a lady who had a bratty stepson. They were having a party, and she had a little too much to drink, got in a fight with her husband,
Okay.
and wandered down the street, and she wanted to go somewhere. And I gave her a ride up to the closest hotel. Yeah, we'll just get you someplace safe. I'm not leaving you here in the middle of the
Yeah.
night. But then I came back out here after that to check on the place, and I pulled into the driveway. The gate was closed and shined my lights on it. And I was backing out, and a car went behind me really slow, and it was a policeman. He turned around and pulled me over. He ran my license plates, and I was from a different town.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, you son of a... No. But then I told him what I was doing. He didn't even take my license or my insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It just irritated me that he did that because I'm like, that's illegal as hell.
Yeah, no, it's crazy that that would even happen. I feel like anytime you're somewhere late at night outside of your home, it's always anytime something crazy like that happens, it always can get your mind running of what
Yeah,
might be out there for sure.
and like I said, museum minded. We're all pretty science minded. I don't believe in ghosts and spirits and all that stuff. But you be out here at night, sometimes it gets a little creepy. You step outside, and you're like, somebody's out there ready to pounce. I'm always think somebody's
Yeah.
going to break it because, like we were talking about that, nobody could ever come in here and get this dinosaur out of here before the alarm system went off and people showed up. But like I said, going back to the whole dinosaur stuff, that market has really blown up. We were talking about Stan. Those brothers actually parted ways, and the one brother got to sell that. One brother got the museum and everything in it. The other one got just the T-Rex. He auctioned it off through Christie's, and they were estimating it would probably go for $5 million. It actually went for $32 million. Whenever you pay for the rights or something, like when he was just a pile of bones in the ground, you could have paid that rancher $10,000 and you would have had the dig rights. He let us dig it up, donated it, and then we got it appraised and he gets a tax write-off for that. And I 3D printed this. This is one of my, it appraised for $2.25 million. We have a safe back there that's an old timey 1800 safe that has a donated collection in it. Will eventually get on display, but it's got probably the premier collection of topaz in the United States, some Brazilian diamonds, gold, stuff like that. It's probably got $500,000 of stuff in it. So we got to have a pretty beefy security system and cameras. Whenever I'm going in and out, I'm like, somebody's going to jump me. Somebody wants in here because they see somebody's here.
I guess I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I mean, it's probably something that you guys need to have pretty extensive security for.
Yeah.
You think of other places that people would be robbed, your mind instantly goes to a bank or instantly
Yeah.
goes to like a
Convenience
jewelry
store.
but
Yeah.
not the museum. Yeah, that's funny. It has been so interesting talking to you today, learning about everything you do with the museum, all the projects that you have worked on to bring things together there. Any last advice for people looking to get involved with museums, 3D printing, or any of the various other things that you're involved with?
Man, I really don't have any advice on the 3D printing. That's just become such a standard thing. People just need to ask questions. I hate that I have to buy everything off Amazon where I'm at. I wish I had a micro center close to me, but the closest one is 3 hours away. But like I said, there's just so much information out there, and that's what like with TikTok. I found you on TikToks where we originally met each other that way. There's so much good content out there. Once in a while, you'll find a slightly toxic thing, but I just find that's a social media community that's honestly not that toxic. As far as museums, people need to find their passion. If you have time or want to give to anything, find what you want in your area, go in, and I guarantee you they have something for you to do. I was originally going to start out because it was post-COVID. I came in and wiped down counters every couple of hours. You'd have kids come in and touch everything, all the glass. We had COVID protocols. We wore masks and cleaned the glass every couple of hours. Even with low traffic, that's how I got started. They may just need you to mop floors for a little while. But as you go, we're pretty hands-on. When people come in, we make sure we greet people, give them a rundown, depending on how it is that day, maybe a personal little tour. You got to learn how to read people. Every museum out there, there's not that many people out there volunteering. Almost every museum I've ever been in is a little shorthanded. If you find something you like or you love that's your passion and you find that spot, just ask them. They're probably going to find something for you to do and appreciate it.
Awesome. I love that. I think you inspired me a little bit to maybe venture out into that realm, and I'm sure you're going to inspire other people to venture out to that too. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on here, sharing all of the different projects that you're working on.
I'll do one last thing. Because the dinosaurs,
Yes,
we were talking about how large he is, and he's here in the background. I'm going to see it. I'm going to take my headset off because I think he's pretty centered. I'm going to walk back and stand under him just so you can get an actual scale.
Please do. Yes, absolutely. I'm glad that you did that because it's a really good perspective to see how big it is with you there.
I can stand under him and put my hand up, and I cannot reach his spine. He's that big.
Put your height out there for everybody. You're about 6 foot. You're a bigger guy too.
I'm about 5'11". I'm just a hair under 6 foot. Everybody's always self-conscious about their height. When I used to go out and party a little more, I'd have people walk up to me, look at me, go, "You're tall. How tall are you?" And I'm like 5'11", and they're like, "No, I'm 6 foot." And I'm like, "No, you're not. No, you're not." Quit being self-conscious. Don't be self-conscious about it, little guy. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that's if there's anything men like to lie about, it's usually their height. For anybody who doesn't follow you already, maybe doesn't follow the museum already, or just wants to see what you have upcoming next, where can people find you online?
Through my TikTok, it's freeze frame 3D. The way I spell it is the ancient sculpted art. But a freeze frame is a picture, so a 3D printed picture is sculpted art, and it's a picture. So freeze frame is a play on words for that. But it's the freeze frame 3D, and like I said, I'm getting ready to start posting again pretty heavy. I'll do the generic setup where you watch something print, but it's going to be dinosaur bones, which will be pretty cool. Most of our stuff is done through social media. You can look up Missouri Institute of Natural Science on Facebook. We also have an Instagram page. It's not all dinosaur related, but we have Mineral Monday, we have Fossil Friday, we do some things like that. And I think on Instagram, it's always, we call it MoNatSci, which is hard to, it's MO for Missouri, NAT for natural, SCI for science. Our website is monatsci.org. We are a nonprofit, so everything here is completely donation, grant, and volunteer based. Our director doesn't even get a paycheck, and it started with his private collection.
That's a very cool story that you guys have over there. I hope many people get to go visit it, and like I said, you on here today will inspire a lot of other people to reach out to different museums.
And they absolutely should. Springfield's a very large, small town, and even cities like this, you have your art museums, your local history museums, and your discovery centers. There's always organizations that need help with something. I do the OCAC stuff as well.
I think any place that you have a level of interest in, I think it's always worth to reach out and see if there's an opportunity there, and maybe people will be surprised at what comes of it. So.
Oh, absolutely. And the world always needs more people to care and more people to help.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Awesome. Daniel, it was such a pleasure talking to you today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. And with that said, that has been Meet the Makers for today.